Well, there's a new development in the California internet sales tax law that Amazon.com has been bucking. The online retailer is offering to hire 7,000 California workers and invest up to $500 million in new facilities there if the state will strike down its restrictive tax law. So the companies have to effectively bribe federal and state governments just to keep a competitive edge. Here to discuss are the freedom fighters, America's Future Foundation Chair Camille Foster, Democratic analyst Tara Dowdell, and La Jolla University economics professor Dan D'Amico. Dan, let me start with you. Is Amazon.com bribing California here? And if so, is this something that's not really a free market agenda?
I wouldn't call it bribery. I think if you're trying to grow your tax revenue, it's better for citizens and it's better for consumers to grow your net amount of economic wealth as opposed to increasing new taxes or increasing your tax rate. Amazon's bargain here represents that truth. California and the policymakers there seem too thick-headed to recognize this, and this is all the much more true in the state of a recession. Adding these sort of tax revenues and constraining business, what they're doing is articulating a job amount and a wealth creation amount that this tax is a trade-off against.
What do you think, Tara? Because it's not just the 7,000 jobs. There are a lot of people who make their money trading on the internet and doing different things, facilitating deals. I mean, I've read something like 20,000 people in California. We're talking about people who have jobs, responsibilities. Do you think the state should take them up on this one?
Well, I think the state should definitely consider it, and this is not unprecedented. A lot of times companies come in and they will offer incentives to get those companies to invest, and they'll say, we'll give you lower taxes, a tax abatement. All these things are done to get companies to invest and create jobs. So I think this is actually just a normal course of action, and California should definitely consider it. We need more jobs.
But here's the thing, though, Camille. California, to Tara's point, they're desperate. And not only are they desperate, though, I think from a political point of view, they're afraid of having egg on their face. Mm-hmm. So do you think that they'll have the will to say, you know what, the route we were going was wrong. Let's go the free market route, or at least the route that creates jobs rather than punishes success?
Yeah, this is a little bit different than the other circumstance that you outlined there, Tara. What we actually see happening is Amazon is coming to them after being pretty much browbeaten. We're threatening you with higher taxes. Well, fine, we'll give you these jobs if you don't give us these higher taxes. I think what's really distressing here is that in California, where we have 12+% unemployment, a struggling economy that is pretty much on the rails here, the legislature is interested in raising taxes. I don't see how that makes any sense at all. Instead of working on getting new revenue here, why don't we talk about reforming the prison system, which costs about as much as they invest in public higher education? Just doesn't make any sense.
And Tara, to that point, in the last 10 years, over 1 million people have left California. These are people who were productive. You know, they had degrees, they had jobs, and these aren't people who are unproductive. It would seem at some point there would be an epiphany amongst those who run this state that we're doing it the wrong way, this sort of counterproductive way we're doing it, and yet this still might be the signal that we'll get to see. If they turn down Amazon.com, I think it means that there's no hope for the state.
Well, I think overall, first of all, let's remember that taxes right now in this country are at a 50-year low overall, so people are paying less taxes. Then you have companies like GE who paid 0 in taxes. You have companies like Google paying 3%. So the notion that everybody's being taxed to death is not really completely a fair notion.
I don't want to get off the topic too much, but we'll bring it back to talk about that GE thing. Remember, this is Jeff Van Melton and President Obama's job czar, and also
and he wants them to pay more taxes.
And they got over on another program called TARP on that one. Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit. Another California nanny state nightmare. The state Senate is considering new legislation already passed in the Assembly that would mandate parents give babysitters a break. Get this one, every 2 hours, and provide a substitute babysitter. Parents will also be required to pay minimum wage plus overtime. Talk about California being nuts. Is this the ultimate nanny state? Camille, I got to ask you, I mean, is this going to help or hurt domestic workers?
I mean, it's quite obvious. Any thinking person understands that this sort of wage floor is necessarily going to destroy jobs. It's going to make it more difficult for people to employ folks to help them to rear their kids and do any other sort of service work around the house. You can't legislate prosperity this way. We don't want more people having to have their employers purchase their benefits for them. We want people to go out into the market and do it themselves. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, Professor D'Amico, and this is absolutely, in my mind, just outrageous nuts. Talk about, the economic impact on this, as well as some of the other stupid, some of the stupid things that are going to be the result of this if it gets through.
I'm no babysitting expert, but what I do know is that the process of selecting a babysitter is very informal and very personal for most people, which means that in order for this legislation to have any teeth whatsoever, it would have to be significantly enforced, and the costs of those enforcement are going to be really, really high. So even if there was a logic that this would create better quality babysitting services or licensing or better quality babysitters or better working conditions for babysitters, it has to be counterbalanced with the recognition that these enforcement costs would be invasive, especially in a state like California, as was mentioned earlier, that has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country. They're obviously going to be using very invasive methods of enforcing these policies that are unsavory, and I don't think anybody would be comfortable with.
Tara, in Italy, there's guilds for everything, taxi drivers, even babysitters, and Italy's economy is just going down the tubes right now. This move toward this kind of thinking, is it just because California sees itself as the golden state, but it's no longer golden, it's tarnished, and this is one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard.
Well, I'm not a fan of regulating babysitters. I was a babysitter once before, and I don't necessarily...
You need a 2-hour break. Really, when you're working at this is tough. You're watching TV and you were probably eating popcorn.
Right. So it was fine. When I was a babysitter, I don't think we needed these type of regulations on babysitters. But there's other parts of this bill that applies to domestic workers and people like that, and those should be considered because they're talking about giving those people a fair wage. Now, remember, we've seen the income inequality in this country just explode. So you have people up here making a ton of money and people down here making very little money, and it's becoming a big chasm in this country, and that's a recipe for disaster as well. You got to grow the middle class. You got to grow the working poor. You can't just have wealth split apart like that.
Tara, do you think that jobs will be created as a result of this or lost? Just frankly.
I'm saying I don't agree with the babysitter portion of it, but paying a fair wage to a
if it wasn't
maid,
fair, would they take the job? Wouldn't they just take a job that will pay them what they're worth?
Some people are very desperate, and so they're willing to take whatever they can get. But we should make sure we're paying people a fair wage. In this economy, people are doing a lot of things that they have to do to get by, and that's good. But if we have an opportunity to make sure they're treated fairly, because if you look at these other countries, if you look at China, India, their middle class is growing.
I think unfairness would be not paying people what you agree with.
Let's bring Professor D'Amico back in on this. Go ahead.
You don't know how to plan for that sort of equality. The fact of the matter is that, yes, people are desperate, which is to say that they're being provided with better opportunity by these informal contracts.
Or
you can't bully people into providing better wages and better conditions in these environments.
And I'm going to make one point, guys. Last week, Larry Fitzgerald signed a contract for $120 million. And guess what? You will never get a babysitter who's going to get that kind of money because there's a lot of people who can do what they do, and there are very few people that can do what Larry Fitzgerald does. That's called income inequality by some. I call it the American dream. By the way, it was supposed to be released in July. Now it's September, and the president finally reveals the latest deficit figures. I tell you what, it ain't good news. It's next.